One of the things I love about Southend is I sort of feel like it's big enough to be exciting, but it's also small enough that it really does feel local and really does feel like a local community club like the ones we all grew up with.
What was that process like for you taking over Southend?
This could take up the whole podcast, so let me think how I answer that.
Was there ever a time for you where you thought, this is more hassle than it's worth?
The stress and also the financial outlay was getting quite significant. He'll bring a lot, right? He's grown technology companies to really large levels. Like the rest of us, loves football. He was actually looking at other clubs and then he really fell in love with our story, similar to me really. We're glad that he chose to join us. He's ambitious, he's a disruptor, he wants things to move quickly, he wants us to move forward.
Yeah, how is that relationship since you've come into the club with the likes of Kevin Mayer and John Still?
I think it's good. hopefully I think it's good. When we take the first brick out and start the rebuilding will depend on all sorts of things, but it is an absolute priority to put a new East Stand in.
I just want to ask you, about the fan base. How supportive have they been?
Oh, it's been incredible. The fan base really galvanised. The crowds were really, really strong, and even in the National League before we came over. They've been incredibly strong since. That bond between the players and the fans that were built under difficult circumstances, I think was really, really special. We could see that. I didn't know how long the honeymoon period would last, right? But they've been very nice to me and they've cut me some slack. You want to manage expectations a little bit. Not too much, because football is about dreaming and hoping, and every team should wake up in August going, hey, we're going to win the league or make the playoffs, and our fans should be no different. I want Southend to be proud of its club and feel like that we're representing them the way they want to be represented.
Welcome back to another edition of the podcast, and on tonight's edition I am delighted to be joined by Southend's owner Justin Rees. Justin, firstly, how are you doing?
Good, Luke. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure to have yourself on. There aren't many owners out there, to be honest, who'd be willing to come on a podcast like this, so we do really appreciate it. But, of course, probably about a year into kind of being involved in the club at Southend now, 4 or 5 months, I'd probably say that you've actually been the owner of Southend. How have you found it so far?
Yeah, I just had to check what month we're in. So we've officially owned it in July, but we had a long lead up to that, as I think everybody knows, with the sort of protracted takeover. But it certainly feels like July that we've really, really got into it and, had a bit more control and can start to look forward rather than just spin the wheels like we were doing for a year. But yeah, it's been good. Like you'd expect in any football club, ups and downs and some things going well, some things we want to improve on. But yeah, so far so good.
I want to speak a bit about your younger life and how you firstly got into football, because obviously in Australia, it's not particularly a popular sport. There's cricket. There's a number of sports that take priority in Australia. So for yourself, how did you get into football?
My dad's British. I grew up with football, so he's a QPR fan, the poor guy. Not doing too well at the moment. But I grew up with football, so I played it since I was 6. Always followed it. I've never been really into any other sports like cricket or rugby, the sports that most people assume us Aussies are into. Football's more popular in Australia than I think people would think. It's bizarre. It's the most played sport, but you're right, it's not the most passionate sport.
Yeah.
So lots of people play it, but for me, it's always been football. But yeah, how I get into it, just like any kid, really. Parents sign you up when you're young and you get hooked, and that's about it, really.
Was it always kind of a dream for you to own a football club? Was it a plan that in the future I'd love to own a football club, or was it kind of a last minute thing?
No, very much a last minute thing. I don't think I would have thought owning a football club, or I should say co-owning a football club, because obviously there's a bunch of us in the consortium. No, it would never have been a thought, and it never would have been a financial possibility until more recently in life. Everyone's circumstances are different, but I had a fairly modest job and fairly modest money, not football ownership money, and then I had a business that did well financially. So it created that opportunity. I think Southend itself was a bit of an impulse buy, but I think I was chatting to some friends recently. They said, it had come up in conversation about, maybe I should look at a football club. And I'm not sure if I even want to admit it. People think Wrexham might have been the influence, but I reckon it was Ted Lasso. I reckon I was watching Ted Lasso. I was thinking, that looks quite cool. But it was always sort of very, very in the back of my mind. And then I've talked about it before on other articles, so I won't go too much now, but it was sort of in the back of the mind, but quite impulsive when I saw the Southend situation. It was kind of looked into it, and sort of a few days later, I was sort of on that journey and, didn't come back out the other side without the club. So
what was it What was it specifically for you when you look at a club like Southend that made you think, yeah, I'd love to be able to own a club like that?
I think if I was going to own a club, I mean, all the other consortium members, they're all Southend locals, so the story for them is obvious. It's their local club. Other than myself and our latest investor, which I'm sure we'll chat about later, we're the only two guys who aren't from the area originally. For me, my career that I had was in project management, so I think part of it was the passion of football, a big part of it, and I think the other part is I wouldn't want a club that was kind of just steady and at its level. I think I would always want a project, and with Southend United, or any club that's really fallen on sort of harder times, there's that project element where you think if you roll your sleeves up and do a bunch of things right, there's that possibility of sort of heading back up, in our case, up the leagues, but it's more than just heading up the leagues. You can really bring life into the club. One of the things I love about Southend is I sort of feel like it's big enough to be exciting. It's big enough with its fan base and its history and its catchment area that as an owner you can think, and as a fan you can think, promotions is within the realms of possibility, but it's also small enough that it really does feel local, and it really does feel like a local community club, like the ones we all grew up with, but big enough where you can dream of lofty goals. So that's a nice
100%. I think I've looked at, you look at your Southend, your Yorkshire Oldhams, the bigger clubs in this division, and you have to say you look at them as sleeping giants with a lot of potential, and that's something I've always seen with Southend when they were in the thick of it under the previous owner and they were going through a lot of financial issues. I think a lot of us who were involved in the National League who run podcasts were coming on and thinking, I'm surprised no one's out there who's actually interested in a club like this, because you look at the history behind it and the potential of the club. It's a huge underdog, I think, in English football with the potential that it's got. But something I'd like to ask, what was that process like for you taking over Southend, starting, in fact, over a year ago when you first showed interest?
This could take up the whole podcast, so let me think how I answer that. It was obviously very, very difficult. Funny enough, for the first few weeks, I decided immediately that I wanted to do it. Like, at first, I was on holidays in Spain. I inquired, took a phone call, and went, "Oh, this is interesting." Flew to Southend 3 days later. Walked around the club, met a couple of people. In my heart, I knew I wanted to do it straight away, but it took a long time to figure out. I mean, the financials were pretty dire, so it took a long time to go, okay, I want to do this, but I can't really see how I can honestly take this on. Part of that was bringing in partners and the consortium, and we all get on really well. So part of it was not doing it alone. So we had to sort of build the consortium in parallel whilst trying to do the deal. And as you would know, and everyone in non-league would know, we had a deadline. So most takeovers, you got a bit of time to see if you want to do it, but we had some pretty fixed deadlines from the court cases. So it was complicated in terms of we had fixed deadlines to do a complicated deal. I was negotiating a deal, but knowing that I couldn't really do the deal by myself, I needed partners, but I couldn't wait until I had all partners because we didn't have time. So we did a bunch in parallel. We finally got the deal done about 3rd of October, and it looked different at the start. What was for sale was, the dream of a new stadium at Fossett's. If you fast forward, we ended up staying in Roots Hall, and I think we're all pretty happy with that. But that wasn't originally what we were looking at. So that first chapter, I think it was complicated, but not in a bad way. It was good. It was fine dealing with Ron. We worked together on trying to get an outcome. I know there was a lot of hostility, and it's not my job to speak about the preceding 25 years, but we sat down and tried to get a deal sorted and ultimately did. The real complications then came from, when we agreed the deal, and obviously it took a long time for that deal to actually happen. And that was quite stressful for all concerned, not casting, no blame in any directions. It was just pretty complicated. And there were ups and downs and multiple times where we thought it might be off. I feel like we did the takeover 3 times.
Yeah, it did feel like that. I thought at first it'd been taken over, and then it turns out you hadn't, and then it just kept being prolonged, didn't it?
Yeah, you almost, if you're cynical, you think it was a tactic. We announced it before Oxford and won that game, announced it before Kidderminster and won that game. So it looked a bit tactical, but I can assure you it definitely wasn't. If it could have been done quicker and with less stress, we would have. I would say, though, it did. The one advantage of the protracted deal was it sort of bonded us all together. The consortium and I, none of us had met each other. Well, a couple of them had, but most of us didn't know each other. So it certainly gave us the opportunity to see if we were going to bond together under stress, because there will be stresses to come. So that was a good way of forging our little team. And I do think we formed a good bond with the fans because they realised, that we were working hard to try and save the club, and indeed the fans were doing their bit to try and save the club. So the one positivity was it sort of was a galvanising effect on the whole group that period of difficulty, and we're going to need that in different ways as we try to move forward.
Was there ever a time for you where you may have wanted to look elsewhere or pull out, with everything that was going on? Because you spoke about the process there. It was a very complicated and long process. Was there ever a time for you where you thought, this is more hassle than it's worth?
Well, when you word it like that, there were several times when we thought, what are we doing? Certainly not to look elsewhere. I think if this had fallen through, I don't think I would have returned to the world of trying to buy a football club. It would have been one and done. There were times, obviously, where there's times where you question, is it all worth? I mean, the stress and also the financial outlay was getting quite significant to not achieve anything. So there were times, but usually we came back together as a group and literally would jump on a Zoom call or whatever and just sort of go, look, the deal's changing, not necessarily in our favor, but usually we all looked around and everyone wanted to do what we set out to do, which was to save the club. So usually it was that common desire to save the club that allowed us to go to the next phase. But there were times where it wasn't an enjoyable period.
Mm-hmm. And what was the process overall since you took over the club? Firstly, what's it like now, and how's it changed the overall atmosphere and environment there for you?
Well, I think in general there was a lot of clouds around Southend and a lot of stress, a lot of anguish. People didn't know what was going on, and it was difficult because you couldn't go up to them and say, look, everything's going to be okay, because we couldn't give that guarantee. So I think a lot of that stress and anxiety's gone away. And when the takeover first goes through, you can imagine any club that gets taken over, there's such excitement and everyone thinks they're going to win the league by 30 points, all that sort of stuff. It's not that easy. If it was, lots of teams would do the same thing. Certainly in our group, I think we're really happy that we've got to the position where we're in control, but we also know that saving the club in July was really the first step, right? To truly do what we set out to do, we need to improve the club on and off the pitch and let it grow into the potential that we've touched on tonight. I think most people can see. So I think now without all those external stresses, we can actually sort of just put our heads down and get to work. And I think we've been trying to do that in sort of quiet, fairly modest ways, just, make improvements on and off the pitch where we can. But we knew there was no quick fix coming in any department. So we're all stuck together on that. And we just got to keep doing our best, keep improving. And I'm sure good things will happen if we do.
Yeah, you speak overall about the consortium, and the idea I get is you don't like taking all the credit because you feel like there's quite a collective group there who've done a lot to take over Southend. How highly would you speak of the other members of the consortium, and what do each member bring to the party?
Yeah, they're brilliant. They're brilliant. I mean, I couldn't have done it by myself, even if I wanted to. I think everyone brings different skill sets. I'll touch on that in a moment. But what we've really needed is, when you share a problem, it's easier to deal with. And there's been times, I think, in the thick of the deal, for example, where my wife would comment, hey, I'm really glad you're doing this with a good group of people. And sometimes it'll be, Jason Brown is particularly prevalent. He's in Hong Kong, tries to stay out of the limelight a bit, but, really smart guy. Anything that's really complicated, I make sure I've got him running his eye over. John Watson, as an example, does a lot of our governance work and finance work, which, if you know Southend, you'll know that the finance work is of particular importance. So I can't name them all, but we're a team, and I think like anything, right, you need those teammates around. We bring different skills. And although there's 10 of us, we know when to let someone sort of take the lead on something and someone else to take the lead on something, so that it doesn't get too inefficient from 10 people having an opinion on every topic. We certainly don't have that, but it's great to sort of have people that A, you like, and B, share your sort of values and vision alongside you when you're trying to achieve things.
Yeah, 100%. And we've also had obviously someone else who's got involved in the consortium and added investment, and that's Shivas Gulati. I believe that's how you pronounce it. What does he exactly bring to the table? Of course, that's only just been announced.
Yeah, so Shivas and I were talking. I think we first started speaking, I feel like it was last April. It was certainly sort of the end of last season. Obviously, with the deal in the state of flux, it was always going to be, hey, let's get all this sorted first and then we'll finalize things later. he'll bring a lot, right? But one of the things he brings in a very specific sense, he's grown technology companies to really large levels. I worked in a technology company, but I'm useless at technology. I was like a project manager. So I was like in the area, but he's an actual technologist. And I think where that's important is technology can help any business, right? For the back office staff, it can help you be more efficient, communicate better. It can help you engage big groups, in our case, our fan base. And we know that in football, if done right, software and data and those sorts of things can be integrated well. So it's early days. We haven't got the specifics, but I think there's some real skill sets there that is different to what we have in the current ownership group, and also different to what we actually have in the club. That really, really strong deep tech. Like the rest of us, loves football. He was actually looking at other clubs when we met him, and then he really fell in love with our story, similar to me, really, and got connected to that story. And we're glad that he chose to join us. I think the other thing is, he's ambitious. He's a disruptor. He wants things to move quickly. He wants us to move forward. Like us, we don't want to settle for this status quo. So I think he'll bring good drive as well as those tangible skills I mentioned before.
Are you looking at any more investors who are going to be involved in Southend in the future?
Yeah, I mean, in the future, sure. We're not actively speaking to anyone at the moment, but we didn't also actively go looking for Shabazz in this instance. It came sort of fairly organically. The consortium's always been very clear. It's not about the individual. In fact, we specifically made it so that no one individual has 51%. We want it to be more democratic. We want there to be a board that debates things and makes sure that the right decisions get through for the right reasons, not, hey, whoever's got the most votes wins. So it's not a closed shop. If the right person that comes along and buys into the story the way we did, wants to come on the journey with us and share the load and offer something, we'd be open to it. But we're not actively looking at the moment.
Do you look at other clubs such as, of course, Wrexham? I know that's a totally different situation, but Wrexham with their takeover, Notts County quite known for their statistics on how they recruit players, and also Oldham when Frank Rothwell took over them. Do you look at clubs like that and take inspiration from them, or do you feel that you want to go on your own path? Or
I mean, in a very general sense, remember, we're still fairly early on, right? So in a very general sense, I think we look at all sorts of clubs, and you can learn a lot of any clubs. I mean, Plymouth, for example, I think have done a lot of stuff really well, not just outperforming their wage bill when they got promoted out of League One. But I read an article, I think it was in The Athletic, how they really, really focused on their identity in the Southwest. And it will sound obvious, but they were sort of focused on, we want to be the club of the Southwest and really mop up all the catchment down there, as opposed to, competing with the Manchester clubs for whatever the talent is coming out of there. So I like the fact that they had an identity and really went after that. And I mean, I'm not close to that club, but outwardly it seems like it's done well. Obviously, Wrexham have done very well. We can explain it away with money, but you still have to, if you spend money, you still got to do it well. I think we've all seen clubs spend money and not win. So fair play to them. They've done well to capitalise on their ownership story, and it's unique to them. I don't think if anyone else did it, it would be as interesting. So we look at clubs generally and learn stuff, but I wouldn't say, hey, we've sat down and said, let's copy this football strategy or that. In fact, our football strategy, we're really happy with the football department we've got with Kevin and John still. So if anything, it would be chatting to them and going, how do we help? How do we give more resources, rather than coming in with some artificial playbook of saying, hey, let's replicate that.
Is the consortium involved in the recruitment side then on players that you're wanting to bring in?
No, I mean, the high level would be, the short answer probably for a fan would be no, but we're still finding our way a little bit, right? So ultimately we want our football department to choose players, sign players, coach players. We want that to be a football department thing. No one in the consortium or the ownership would have a particular view. We don't look at analysis. We're not out there scouting. It's not our role in the organization. Our main role is to set some frameworks and set some processes, budget being the most obvious, and then empower the guys that know what they're doing to go on and do that. So that's our overall strategy. But again, we're pretty early, right? So we're still, as a group, figuring out what works for us and how to find that balance.
Yeah, how is that relationship since you've come into the club with the likes of Kevin Mayer and John Still? Of course, they've been through a lot. They've done very well with the club. How's that relationship been for yourself with them coming in?
I think it's good. hopefully they think it's good. I mean, they're great guys. They've been in football in different capacities for a long time. I think they work really well together. And it's not just those two, of course. We've got really good staff around them in the assistant coaches, medical and sports science, etc. So we were really, really happy with the football setup that we had. If you look last year, they did incredibly well to essentially finish 5th if you disregard the 10 points. So we knew we had a really good platform to build on, not just in terms of performance, but they really look after each other. There's a good team spirit there. They do things the right way. I think if you get to know the guys, they're good people. They do things the right way, which is really important, certainly to me and us. So, yeah, I think the relationship is good. And again, our job in this system is to set budgets and things, of course, but also help them. How do we help them to be better 1%? So hopefully we can live up to our part of the role over the couple of years. And I think if we give them the support that I think they deserve, then I think we're going to do good stuff.
So I'm guessing by that statement, you're hoping that Kevin Mayer and the likes of John still are going to be involved in your projects long term then?
Absolutely. One of the first things we did was Kevin, Darren and Mark offer them, and they accepted sort of long-term contracts. So that was, we knew that was the management team that we wanted. And it wasn't just, I mean, they'd earned it with their loyalty to the club, but it was more than that. We think they're the right management team to get the best out of the players and help us move up the leagues. So yeah, they've signed up for long term. I think we only signed that contract December of last year. Mm-hmm. So one of the first things we did, obviously, when the takeover was announced, although not completed. We're really happy with the structure we've got, and we believe that is the right structure to take us up.
Of course, you look at Southend so far this season, 15 in the league. How would you say the season's gone so far for Southend? Of course, people will look at last season and say, well, we finished fifth if you want for the points deduction. Surely we should do better. But I think we can both agree that it's a lot more complicated than that to, replicate what you did last season. Even though it's a lot brighter future ahead for Southend fans. But for yourself, how would you say the season's gone overall on the field?
I think the league table doesn't exactly give context, right? We were under embargo until I think mid-July. So I think the first part of what you said was right. We had the right platform to go and kick on, but under embargo, we lost a couple of players. Mm-hmm. We couldn't replace them, and that embargo was, I won't go into it now, but it wasn't like we saw it coming. So we were a little bit caught off guard. So it really threw off our recruitment plans. And again, we didn't own the club then, so we couldn't exactly solve it as quickly as you might think. There's some less. I mean, being under an embargo at the start of the window, I think, is more damaging in the National League than, say, not that will ever happen, the Premier League, where mm-hmm. players run down their contract and there's a flurry of moves at the end of the window. I think at our level, a lot of people finish their contract in June, and they want to be getting paid from July at this sort of level, right? So that was really quite disruptive to our plans. We then lost 6 players in a week for different reasons, most notably 4 injuries. That the double header weekend where we had Barnet on a Friday and Dagenham on a Monday, we sort of came out of that with 1 point, more importantly, 4 injuries at the end of that. So, I mean, every club has their periods, but I think we came in a bit underdone, and then we lost several players for different reasons within a very short period of time, at a time of the year that it's quite difficult to replace. The positive front was I was really glad that we didn't just panic buy, because if you panic buy in that period and you buy the wrong players on 2 to 3 year contracts, it wouldn't just be the start of this season that we'd be lamenting. We'd ultimately be hamstrung for next season and the season beyond. So credit, I think, to the players and the team for weathering a storm where we were pretty threadbare for several games this season. And then, of course, we're playing twice a week throughout September. So in a very long-winded way, I think there's reasons why we were slow to start that are pretty easily explained. I mean, we lost a lot of players, right? And it's not that easy to fix it. I think in recent times, despite the last couple of results, I think the form has certainly improved. But ultimately, I mean, I'll just speak for me now. I don't really look 1 or 2 game periods, 3 game periods, right? We know that a lot of work needs to be done off the pitch. And we need to give a lot more support on the pitch than they've had before to truly be able to perform to their abilities. So that's a journey that's really only started this year. So although we'd have all liked to have picked up more points at this time of the year, our focus is really on supporting the managers and the squad and getting them up to their full complement of players, which we're just about at. And then I think if we do that, they'll get the results that come with that.
Are you looking to bring potentially more players through the door in the later months for Southend to really put a case together to push on, or are you happy with the squad at the moment?
I mean, that's probably more of a Kevin and John question, genuinely, right? So it'd be that it's not the owners coming in saying we have a view and we want to do this to the squad. What we do is set a budget and then work with Kevin and John and the guys to say, what's our priority at the moment? What does January look like? What does next year look like? But ultimately, it's those guys that set the strategy, and I would absolutely expect them not to communicate it too widely because they'll keep their cards to their chest. But I don't believe that the ownership should be directly involved in those sorts of things.
Fair enough then. So, of course, you look at Southend this season. What are the aims for you as an owner for Southend this season, looking in?
I guess we look at every department and we have some goals for Roots Hall, some of which we've achieved. We've increased the capacity recently there's lots of seats there, but our capacity was limited to about 8,500 before, or a bit more. Now it's up to 10,000, and we utilised a bunch of that for Charlton in the FA Cup. So it was the biggest crowds we've had in a while and a really good atmosphere by all reports. So we've certainly got some work we want to do on the stadium, improving bars and food outlets, bringing on capacity, fixing things, making it a bit more of a hospitable place to be, and not just saying, hey fans, when we build the new stand, it'll be good then, because we've had that culture of, hey, just wait for another couple of years for quite a while, right? So we're trying to improve things around the place. On the pitch, I think we need a period of stability. I think we talk about players and injuries and all those sorts of things, but I think also there's a danger you can forget the mental side of it. And a lot of the players went through a lot of turmoil last year, as did the back office staff, by the way. And some of those things can affect performance as well. So what we're trying to bring is stability, support in different ways, and then allow the team to sort of get up to their full complement. And then I'm sure the performances will follow that. There's other sort of goals that we have under the hood. They're probably not that exciting, but we have, like any other organization, we've got financial goals, and we're trying to trim the losses a bit. We sort of lose quite a lot of money. We're trying to lose a bit less like this year than we did last year and head in the right direction on that way, whilst keeping the balance of investing on the pitch.
Yeah.
They're very boring answers. Sorry, I'm used to giving business answers. So
no, it's fine. But no, like I said, I look at Southend, I look at what they've gone through over the last year, and I also look at other clubs when I look at Southend. I look at how long it's took Oldham to really put a case together to push on. Even York under Matt Uglow, and these clubs, well, York particularly, I don't think we're under any of the significance of going out of existence that Southend were actually come under at the time. Yet they've still struggled to really put a case together, and it's only now that they're at a point where they can really push on. So for me, I look at Southend and I do think most Southend fans, and you'll probably agree, will probably look at this and think, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, is getting Southend out of the league, because I know that's something that Southend supporters probably want, because they're in a division where they probably look at this and think, this isn't the division that Southend United will be in. And I think most people will probably agree, but with everything that's happened over the last couple of years, they've found themselves in this division. So now it's a case of, trying to get out. But before I come on to the stadium and everything like that, I want to discuss the FA Cup a bit. Now, you look at Southend, and it's been quite a big talking point, is FA Cup replays. Now, they played Charlton, which was quite an attractive draw, I think, for Southend United fans to play a side like Charlton. I don't think it's too far away from Southend. They're also quite a big club as well, Charlton. I think the disappointing thing was, if it wasn't for them getting rid of replays this year, Southend United would have got a replay away at Charlton. So they were a victim of that, I believe, Southend. How disappointing was that for you and the consortium and Southend as a club as a whole to have not had that replay?
I can't really speak for the consortium because it's not something we've specifically discussed. I think when the decision was taken to scrap replays, it was we were trying to save the club from annihilation, so it wasn't our number one priority. And part of that included some interesting discussions with the National League, so we weren't necessarily in a position where we wanted to throw our opinion into that particular ring at the time. And I don't want to speak. I mean, if we were in position, one of the things we would have done is ask our fans. So I think if we'd have won on penalties, we probably would have been very, very glad that they'd scrapped FA Cup replays and we didn't have to try and win away at the Valley. Obviously, we lost 4-3, so it would have been nice to have a trip there. So maybe leave it out. Over time, some teams will get through because they don't have to sweat it again, and some won't. It's probably not for me to speak more broadly, even for our club, about how impactful it is that we've lost that replay opportunity. I was in Australia, so I missed the game. So I was really gutted we didn't get the replay, because then I could have gone. But yeah, more broadly, I'm sure there's people that are really disappointed about it, and I understand why, but I'm probably not the best person to speak massively.
So in terms of the stadium renovation, I know you spoke a little bit about that. A lot of Southend fans contacted me because they wanted me to ask you questions about that, and what's the process going forward for that at Southend, and when are you planning? I know it's quite a question that I'm putting you on the spot here, and you probably won't have all the answers that everyone's wanting at this time because it's still early days. But for you, we look at the stadium renovation. Personally, for you, when's the best time do you feel that you can kind of get the ball rolling with this?
Well, we've started in terms of the very early planning. There's a lot that goes into it. I mean, the main thing we want to do is build a new main stand, which for us is our east stand. And we've got to smarten up all the areas around Roots Hall. It's not just about the stand. That the whole area is sort of a little bit desolate at the moment and could do with a bit of regeneration. So we're not property people, so we're still making sure that we're speaking to the right people who have skills there and starting to plan it. I think the planning should start now, and we should start to get ready. When we take the first brick out and start the rebuilding will depend on all sorts of things, most notably finances and having all that lined up. So right now we'll plan. Of course, part of that planning eventually will be bringing fans in, having their input, but we're really, really early days at the moment. Again, because we've only been in the building for a couple of months, but it is an absolute priority to put a new East Stand in at a minimum. But that'll be several years, even if we go really quickly now, I would say.
What type of capacity would you ideally be wanting at Roots Hall in the future?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. Again, it's probably something we need to get advice on. And given that at least the first step will be a new East Stand, we'll probably have to think about levels, right? So we might say, okay, with the new East Stand, we'll take the capacity up a little bit to here. And in the future, we can earmark other renovations to take it higher. I mean, at the moment, until we're selling out our current capacity, the highest priority isn't increasing it. We actually have 13,000 seats at the moment, but can only use 10 because of different safety and other risk factors. So utilizing the capacity we already have would take us higher. Hopefully the fans sell out more games, and that will drive the need higher. But for now, I don't think capacity 13, 15,000, I think seems fine for now. But I'm sure, again, there'll be experts that can offer us an opinion as to what the number should be and why.
I think overall, you look at Southend since you and the consortium came in, and there's already been a boom. We've seen season tickets significantly increase on previous years. So it does feel like Southend, off the field in terms of crowds are probably going to get even better, and they've always been well supported. And that's something I think none of us can kind of argue about, is the fact that you look at Southend, everything they were going through, they were still getting 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 in. So imagine them, when they're at top of the league or in any position, in a more healthy position, the crowds that Southend are going to be able to produce is going to be crowds that are well above National League level. And I just want to ask you, about the fan base. How supportive have they been with the consortium and yourself? And what's it been like being part of the fan base now?
Oh, it's been incredible. So we talked at the start about, how difficult it was, the takeover process, and is there any periods where you think, oh, is it all worth it? But honestly, you meet fans every Saturday. We'd go to the games, and the level of support from fans was really, really strong. Or they contact me on, in my case, LinkedIn, etc. Very, very supportive. The most common sort of example for me was, people saying, hey, my granddad took me to Roots Hall when I was 10, and now I take my grandkids, or I was worried that I wouldn't be able to take my grandkids. That sort of multi-generational support. You've got a lot of that. I'm sure in all clubs, but particularly in Southend, it's handed down from generation to generation. And I think the fan base before I came along, they'd recognise the importance of their club. The club didn't go out with a whimper. The fan base really galvanised. The crowds were really, really strong, even in the National League before we came over. They've been incredibly strong since, but even before, the club was well supported, and the fans were doing everything they could to show that. And I think that bond between the players and the fans that were built under difficult circumstances, I think was really, really special, and we could see that. But yeah, certainly for me, I didn't know how long the honeymoon period would last, right? But they've been very nice to me, and they've cut me some slack so far, and I think we all appreciate it. And we're doing our best.
Sorry, have you implemented any like personal ideas off the field for like catering, the match day experience, and if not, is there any more that you're wanting to add in the future?
Me personally,
yeah,
we got a lot of good people in the club. We've talked about Kevin and John and their team, but also Tom Lawrence, our CEO, and the guys and girls behind the scenes that you don't see. Normally, what we do is say, hey, the guys doing media or fan engagement, pop your strategy down that you think it should be. Then I or others will review it and have our input, and sort of together we'll do it. So in the case of our communication and how we engage our fans, we had some ideas there to really increase it from where it had been before. And I think we're doing some good things on both fronts there. We've got a fan advisory board, for example, that we're in the process of setting up at the moment. And there are lots of other touch points so that the fans can be much more engaged with how their club is run than it was previously. We've done some different stuff in food and beverage. We swap ideas all the time, but I think one of the things you've got to do as an owner is be humble enough to realize, unless you bring a very specific, relevant skill, don't try, just because you're the owner, don't suddenly pretend you're playing fantasy manager over there or master chef over there. So I think what I've used to doing is running projects and running businesses, which usually means you've got the right people around you who tend to know the right ideas. And as long as you help each other out and add to those ideas, I think we'll move in the right direction. But none of us have bought anything particularly secret saucy from elsewhere. We're just run a good organization and a good business with good people that keep moving forward. Our mantra is just keep moving forward, just keep improving things on and off the pitch. And if we keep doing that, eventually we'll be where we want to be in all sorts of ways.
Have you learned a lot from owning a football club over the last year? Is there a lot of things? Obviously, it's not been a simple process for you, so you've kind of been thrown straight into the deep end here. But have you learned a lot about just owning a football club in general over the last year at Southend?
Yeah, I suspect, given I knew nothing before, I suspect we've learned a fair bit actually. I mean, I mentioned Tom before, our CEO. He's been great. So he was the CEO of Gillian previously. He's been our CEO for a few years. So certainly the football specific stuff, Tom's been a real support for me. Often I'll have lots of ideas and Tom will very politely give me the context that maybe was missing from my ideas, which was great. And it's really important because, all of us in the consortium haven't owned a football club before or worked in a football administration role, with the exception of Gary Lockett, who's sort of been around the club and a director for a while. So I think we're learning a lot. In many ways, it's not too dissimilar to any other business in a sense. There's a lot that you can port over from the other stuff that we've done. But of course, there are differences and we've got to be respectful of those. And one of the things we've tried to do is not change too much too quickly. I think you see examples of some takeovers that they do a flurry of activity and take a couple of steps backwards before they ultimately then step forward. So we've tried to avoid running in the wrong direction too quickly and being a bit more of a slow and steady approach as we get our feet under the table.
Mm-hmm. What's the long-term goal for you at Southend United since you've taken over the club? Because we've seen Southend United being in the Championship as early as, I think, the year I was actually born in 2007 was the last time they were in the Championship. But what is the overall goal for you to get Southend to?
I mentioned before, like my background was project management. So rightly or wrongly, I look at the world in 3 to 5 year chunks, and I look at the Southend United story. This chapter of our story, I think no matter who owns it, was about stability, improving Roots Hall and its surrounds and bring that whole area back to life, not just the stadium, fixing the finances so that we have more money to put on the pitch, because ultimately everything we do really should be about eventually having the best possible football team for our area. But we all know that you've got to fix the things around it for that to happen. So I think in 5 years' time, we want to be stable, financially better is the lazy word, but financially eradicate our losses, tap into the potential of the city that is behind the club so that we can have better facilities, and ultimately that will support the team. Obviously, everyone wants me to say that we want to go up the leagues. We do. We won't put a specific timing on it, but I think it's fair to say, and we want to get back into the Football League in due course. We legitimately haven't put a specific timing on it because it's a tough league.
Yeah.
We can say whatever we like, but Frank will want Oldham to get promoted, and Forest Green want to get promoted, and Barnet want to get promoted, right? So everyone wants to do it. We've focused on ourselves. We genuinely feel that we've got such a good base there. And if we reinforce it and support it and take away some of the obstacles that they've had to deal with of late, we think our time will come. We're pretty determined to do the hard work to make that happen.
Yeah, I genuinely look at Southend, and I look at where they've been and the potential of the club, and I really do feel that it'll certainly be an interesting project there because you look at there's so much potential with the club surrounding area. They're now a city, I believe, as well, Southend, and for me overall, I look at them as a club that could be going as far as League One, the Championship, and who knows? You look at clubs like Luton and how well they've done in the past.
I think that's our job. So you can imagine if you're me, which I am, you want to manage expectations a little bit. Yeah. Not too much, because football is about dreaming and hoping, and every team should wake up in August going, hey, we're going to win the league or make the playoffs, and our fans should be no different. Obviously, we've got a role to make sure that to do our role properly as owners, we have to be a little bit calmer and look a little bit longer term and not so short term. But the potential of the club is really, really clear. And our job is to get the maximum potential out of all those things you talked about: the support, the fan base, the catchment area. We used to have a really good academy. When we get back into the leagues, we'd like to turn that back on. So there's so much potential there, and our job is to really steer the ship to maximize that potential. And I think what we can say is if we maximize the potential of Southend, I would expect that's a club that's in the football leagues with nice facilities, nice training facilities, nice stadium to watch football. That would be the 5-year goal for me.
How do you want Southend to be perceived by the wider audience? For example, myself as a fan who supports Halifax, or other people around who just enjoy football. How do you want Southend to be seen?
Well, one of the things we talked about really early when we came in was we want to be a club that does things right. I don't want to comment too much on the past because it's really not my place, but looking forward, we wanted to just do things right, starting with how we treat each other in the building, stuff that you guys wouldn't see. But I think culture and values, you got to live them every day or they're not genuine. So we really want to do things right. We really want to play our role in the community. So I really mean that. We're not just, a square of grass in the middle of the community and a few football fans coming down and watch us. You can feel with Southend, and I'm sure a lot of clubs, particularly as you get out of the major cities, we really feel that responsibility to bring everyone in the community together as we do, but also give back to the community. And the community, of course, unashamedly, we need its help, whether it be business sponsorship or, of course, the fans to turn up. So, I'm not sure I look further afield than really Southend. I want Southend to be proud of its club. I want them to feel like they've got somewhere where they can go no matter who they are, and at least on a Saturday enjoy themselves and forget about the troubles of the week, and feel like that we're representing them the way they want to be represented. That's probably my real focus.
You speak about bringing the community together. Is there any initiatives that you've already implemented in getting the community together?
Well, we do a lot of stuff at the moment. So we support different charities in various different ways. We have a community foundation that on our behalf, the Southend United Community Foundation, is out there going to schools and dealing with local groups. Dealing with the wrong word, sorry. Engaging local groups. So we do a lot of good work in the community already. And of course, part of our role as the football club is just everyone comes together on a match day and we make sure that that's something that everyone can enjoy no matter what their perspectives on the world are. So I think we're doing a lot of that good stuff, and it's just about making ourselves available I have charities and social groups reaching out all the time. Sometimes it's just to do collections at Roots Hall, or can they put themselves in the program to raise money, hold charity events at the club, those sorts of things.
Well, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, so I've got like a few final questions that are kind of a little bit off topic. They're not a few about Southend, but they're a bit more fun than actual serious down questions, to be fair. So the first one we've got is, if Southend United win, now I know you're not always in the country and stuff, but what would be your dream type of meal or place to go, like Italian, Indian?
If Southend win a game?
Yeah. We could say it whenever. If they lose a game, is there something different you have? Or is it not?
Well, if Southend win, it'll probably be fish and chips on the way to the railway or pub or something. Is usually, if they lose, usually I sneak off to the Roslyn Hotel, which is like the hotel not far from Roots Hall, and I'm often in bed by like 6 o'clock, sort of miserable, hiding away from the world, all socialized out. So yeah, if we win, takeaway and a beer at the pub. If we lose, hide away in my room in the hotel.
I'm asking you this for suggestions because obviously I'll be coming down with. I've been to Roots Hall before, but we were kind of in and out. So this time I'm going to stay down there, and I come with Halifax. So I'm kind of asking, in a way, trying to get you to hint suggestions for places to go out for tea afterwards. But no, in terms of like boyhood team, did you ever have one in Australia, or was it over here? Or
no, Arsenal.
Arsenal
was my team growing up. I don't remember choosing Arsenal. I think I was just sort of born into it. But my grandparents were both Arsenal, so I can only assume that they converted me. And thank God, because I mentioned my dad's a QPR fan, so
yeah,
could have gone either way. So I was fairly happy with how it turned out.
Fair enough. Then, was there any like icons that you kind of inspired to be like your Thierry Rees, for example, of the players? Or
I would Thierry Henry wouldn't like you mentioning. Not really. I mean, I love that. Obviously, I was around for the Invincibles. Before that, I was sort of the era that I remember the most was sort of the more of a boring Arsenal, George Graham, Alan Smith up front, which didn't bother me. I was in Australia, so I couldn't actually watch many of the games anyway. You get the paper, you'd see that we won 1-0. It was fine. Obviously, the Wenger years were much more exciting with Bergkamp and Henry and all those guys. I still think Henry's the best that we've had. But no, from a playing perspective, there's no one that would want to be compared with me and my little style of playing, let me tell you.
Fair enough then. Is there any, I'm not sure if you've done away games yet with Southend, but is there any away game for you that you look at and you think you're quite excited to go to this season?
Yeah, Gateshead is our final away game, so that's going to be really cool. Last year it was Fylde, which was pretty cool, right? So we stayed at the hotel in Blackpool, and in terms of our last away game, and fans go up. It's usually pretty fun on the for the last away game. Pretty sure it was the last away game. Yeah, I think it was. My memories playing tricks on me. So this year Gateshead, partly because it's the last game of the season, so I think hopefully there's something riding on it, but it's usually a bit of a fun atmosphere. I've been to a few away games. Went to Oldham, for example. That was actually this year. I went to Oldham, and just as I arrived, I bumped into Frank, and it took me around their sort of fan zone. We had a few beers with the locals, so that was really fun. I went to Kidderminster last year, which was specifically fun because it was when we announced the exchange of contracts. So I enjoy the away games. When I was an Arsenal fan living in London, I preferred the away games to the home games because you get that. Away fans have more fun, as they say. But yeah.
Yeah, it's fair. Would you be making the trip to Halifax, do you reckon, this season? Or
I think I'm not. Isn't it on the 30th?
November. I think it is this month, actually.
Yeah, I think I'm coming over for the 2 games prior. So we got Woking on the Tuesday. In Forest Green. Beautiful Harry Cardwell's return to Roots Hall on the Saturday. So I think because I'm over for those 2, I might skip Halifax away. Sorry, Luke.
Fair enough then. It's not a good one to miss, to be honest. It's seen as one of the better away games in the division. But in terms of Southend, and I feel like I could kind of guess, I reckon, who your dream FA Cup draw would be. But what would your dream FA Cup draw be for Southend then?
The obvious answer for me would be Arsenal away, but then I'm like, I'm not sure that it is because, I don't know, it's Arsenal, right? So, obviously I want Southend to win. Might even be tempted to say Liverpool away. Liverpool's obviously a pretty special club. I thought about saying QPR because it's my dad's team, but that'd be very, very complicated. So I'll stick to Liverpool.
You got like a kind of music taste, and if so, is there any tunes that you'd like to see be implemented into like the playlist at Roots Hall?
My music taste is like, my wife calls it like funeral music. It's like acoustic, really, really chilled. Usually pretty miserable lyrics about very sad things. So I should stay well away from the playlists at Roots Hall. We're actually doing a thing at the moment where fans, as a fan engagement thing, hey fans, send us in your songs, which I think is a nice idea. The problem is if a fan sends in a song saying, the one that we're joking about at the moment is, Three Little Birds, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. And then you've just lost the game 1-0 or something. And that song comes on, you're like, oh, it's not quite working. But as I said before, we'll keep trying things. But for me, my music taste is slow, acoustic, and therefore not what we need at a football stadium.
Fair enough. I'm trying to think like Australian bands. I think the only one I can know is DMAs, and they're either Australian or New Zealand. I'm not too sure. But in terms of like TV series, are you into like your TVs? Any series that you're currently watching at the moment? Or
bizarrely, I'm watching Prison Break at the moment, and I'm not really
sure.
All my
mates have seen that. I've not seen it yet.
I watched it like a long time ago, but I'm watching that at the moment. I watch series stuff, but nothing that I'm actually. I tell you what I do like is Brooklyn Nine-Nine. There you go. That's the one.
It's an American,
I love that show. But I tend to just watch sort of stuff that I can not really pay too much attention to in the background.
Yeah, easy listening, and I suppose. But I think the one final question that I was going to ask you would be, if the opportunity arose and a company came towards you asking for them to do a documentary on Southend, would you go ahead with it?
Maybe. Would depend. It would probably, I don't know, maybe.
Fair enough then. Well, Justin, I do really appreciate you coming on tonight. I know you're a very busy man, and like I said, there's not many owners out there who'd be prepared to come on a podcast like this, so I do really appreciate you coming on.
No, you're welcome. Thanks, Luke. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you.